In a small chapel beneath the Czech town of Kutná Hora, silence hangs heavy. Light filters through dusty windows, illuminating a chandelier made entirely of human bones. Skulls line the walls. Femurs dangle like garlands. Above the altar, the crest of an aristocratic family is spelled out in vertebrae and jawbones. This is the Sedlec Ossuary, better known as the Bone Church, and its most famous transformation began in 1870, when a woodcarver named František Rint turned centuries of death into a work of sacred design. The story of the Bone Church begins long before Rint's arrival. In 1278, an abbot of the Sedlec Cistercian monastery brought back a small amount of soil from Golgotha, the hill where Christ was said to have been crucified. He sprinkled it over the cemetery grounds, instantly transforming Sedlec into one of the most prestigious burial sites in Central Europe. Pilgrims from across the continent requested to be buried there, but as the Black Death swept through in the 14th century and the Hussite Wars erupted in the 15th, death came in waves. The cemetery filled. Graves were stacked. By the early 1400s, an upper Gothic church was constructed over the mass graves, and a lower chapel was set aside to house the overflowing remains. It became an ossuary, a final resting place for bones, separated from the flesh that once bore them. Starting in 1511, a half-blind monk was tasked with organizing these bones. He began stacking them in geometric patterns, forming early pyramids of skulls and femurs. For centuries, the ossuary stood as a grim but solemn memorial to mortality. But in 1870, everything changed. The Schwarzenberg family, who owned the land at the time, commissioned František Rint to bring order and perhaps beauty to the chaos. Rint was not a famous sculptor, but a meticulous woodcarver. What he created over the next 3 years is unlike anything else in Europe. First, he bleached every bone to a uniform ivory white, treating them with lime. Then, he began to assemble them, not just in piles, but in patterns. He built 4 massive pyramids in the corners of the chapel. He strung skulls into garlands. He designed chalices and monstrances out of pelvic bones and vertebrae. And at the center of it all, the chandelier. The chandelier at Sedlec is said to contain at least one of every bone in the human body. It hangs from the ceiling like a divine relic of anatomy, both a scientific marvel and a spiritual reminder of death's inevitability. Near the entrance, Rint spelled his name in bones, and on the wall, he constructed the Schwarzenberg family coat of arms, complete with a raven pecking at a severed Turkish head, referencing the family's military victories over the Ottomans. That, too, was made entirely of bones. Visitors were stunned. What had been a quiet ossuary became an attraction. Over time, the Bone Church became one of the Czech Republic's most visited sacred sites, drawing tourists, historians, and the curious alike. But not everyone was comfortable. The use of real human remains, especially in decorative forms, sparked debates about dignity and the ethics of display. Some saw Rint's work as irreverent, others as a deeply Christian meditation on death. After all, memento mori was a guiding principle of medieval and Baroque spirituality. Remember, you must die. In recent years, the chapel has undergone careful restoration. Since 2019, technicians have used photogrammetry and lime treatments to stabilize and preserve the fragile sculptures. Bones have been gently removed, scanned, and repositioned, honoring both Rint's artistry and the individuals behind the remains. The Sedlec Ossuary isn't the only chapel of its kind. Similar sites exist in Poland's Skull Chapel and Portugal's Capela dos Ossos, but none match Sedlec's ambition, its scale, its symbolism, its fusion of death and design. František Rint was not building horror. He was building memory. Today, the Bone Church stands as both a work of art and a warning. That time devours all, that empires fall, that bone outlasts flesh, and that, in the end, we are all part of the same structure. If you liked what you watched, please like and subscribe. We post interesting and crazy stories from throughout history every Wednesday and Saturday. Yesterday's craziness, because yesterday was crazy too.